Thank you for checking out our Nerdy Bits. This is Tim the Nerd, and I am joined by Professor Aubrey. And like we mentioned a week or so back on one of our Nerdy Bits songs of the week, we had other ideas for Nerdy Bits segments as well, and one of them being Happy News.
That's right. We all need some happy news.
That's right. That's why we are releasing this on Sunday, because we want you all at the end of a week before the very start of the next particular week to just take a moment to reflect on something happy.
Yeah, and I think we historically got this from newspapers and local TV news, but we don't have newspapers and we don't have local TV news anymore. So, those sweet little stories that you would find out about your community, you just don't find out about anymore. So, we're giving you a little piece of local TV/local newspaper.
Well, how about you start things off?
All right, that sounds good. And my local story is local to a little town in Finland. This story takes place in a European city. And basically, what it is the city decided to take its park benches and paint them different colors. And they did that not only to be attractive, but because the colors are a code. And that code establishes whether you want to speak to someone or you don't want to speak to someone. So it's an invitation to a conversation. Say if you sit on a green bench. Sit on a green bench, it means you're ready to talk to someone. Anyone can sit down with you. If you sit on a yellow bench, it means you might be open to conversation, but it depends on who's asking. And then a red bench, which means I don't want you to talk to me at all. This allows people to actually have an experience of meeting other people in person. And also, it's a consent-based idea because everyone in the scenario is consenting to the conversation, right? If I don't want to have one, I don't have to have one. If I do want to have one, I can. And everybody knows what's up with the other person. The cool thing about this, right? No algorithm. It's not a computer telling you who you should be interested in. It's almost like old style society where human beings talk to each other, even when they didn't know each other. And that's how they got to know each other.
And then you're pointing at me just because I would always be on the red bench.
Well, I think you would always be on the red bench.
You are correct.
Where do you think I would be?
Depending on the day, I think you would err on the side of probably the yellow bench.
Yes.
Yeah, because introverts don't fall under one particular category, right? Being an introvert is a spectrum, just like anything else. And, my version of being an introvert is much different than your version of being an introvert. I mean, you have the ability to be a lot more sociable than I do, but that does not mean you want to at times.
That's exactly right. And I don't know if you need to give up entirely on the idea that you could do these things if you at some point in the future. You never know what might happen.
This does remind me of a store. I think it might have been a makeup store in America that had baskets, color-coded baskets. It was two different colors, and they were coded for, like one color was, take this around if you want to be approached by, the salespeople to be asked for help. The other one was if you just want to do your shopping on your own and not be interrupted. And I love that idea. I wish more stores in America took advantage of that.
I really love that. I hate to be asked if I can be helped unless it's a very small store in which it would be awkward to walk in and have them not say anything. Do you know what I'm saying? Like a little boutique or something, you want to be friendly and say hi. But, Target, you don't need to try to talk to me. I don't think the employees that's necessarily their favorite part either.
Yeah, just because you can get quite gun shy at times, depending on some of the previous customers you may have experienced.
I so hear that. I so hear that. That used to happen to me at the hospital I worked at, which is a mental hospital, where, you wanted perhaps to avoid social contact. But you had to figure that out by engaging in social contact. And so everybody who worked there kind of hit a wall where they were like, okay, no, these really aren't my friends. And I know you've talked about that before at work.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, previous work experiences have led me to the point to where, I think my coworkers that I currently work with think like I'm a nice guy, but I really don't open up that much to them. It's like I try to make the workday go by as happy as possible, but we're not hanging out after work, catching up or having a party or anything like that. It's just my relationship with my coworkers is at work. That does not mean I'm not open to the idea of a friendship developing and going further or anything like that. But for me, I just found, especially after Apple, as I've talked about on Friends Talking Nerdy before, that the more I had work friends, the more that became my life, and the more it became to where everybody would meet up and then just bitch about work. And it just was this never ending cycle of negativity, And again, I want to be 100% clear. I'm not saying friends you make at work are a bad thing. But I think a lot of people do fall under the trap of making their entire lives centered around work, centered around, the friendships they make at work. And they don't realize the importance of, having some sort of a life outside of work with people that have nothing to do with your work so you can all just relax and have fun.
And I have grown that way more and more over time to the extent that I really don't have friends at work. Like I have friends at work. Like we're both at work. We're both being paid to be there. I can be nice to somebody, be friendly. But as soon as I'm off the clock, I don't want to be engaging with anyone, honestly, except the people that I'm very close with.
Right. But I think I know you enough that I don't think I'm out of bounds by stating that, if there was a coworker that a friendship, a real friendship actually developed and not a work acquaintanceship or whatever, you wouldn't necessarily turn down that opportunity to have it be something outside of work, but you're just realizing the importance of keeping work at work and keeping, home at home.
That's right. Because there's always that urge to talk about work when you are hanging out with somebody that you work with.
Well, any other thoughts on the park benches in Europe?
No, but I think we should do something similar in Portland, but we've got to come up with something a little more ambiguous, like purple means if you're cool, you can talk to me or something very Portlandy. But I think it could be fun. It could be a great way to teach people about consent. What about you, Tim? What's your happy news for the week?
Well, it is a story I came across that started off because of something bad that happened.
Mm.
Do you remember in 2020, I guess it was in New York City, I believe, this African American guy was bird watching in a park, and a woman came and her dog was off leash, and the guy was like, "You need to have your dog on a leash." And the woman in question, a white woman, was like, "Oh no, you're talking to me, so I'm going to call the police and say you threatened to kill me." And that caused a big brouhaha. Well, that got the ball rolling with like national ornithology groups out there, birdwatching groups, to kind of reassess things. What that moment actually did, for one, was it actually did spur the growth of bird watching groups for the African American community, whether it be in New York or elsewhere around the country. But most importantly, what it's done, thanks to the Audubon Society, is that there are actually some birds that have been named after human people for whatever reason, and some of those names of people, like I believe, I think it was James Audubon or whatever, was a slaveholder and was against abolition and stuff like that. So,
Which is why the Audubon in Portland is no longer called Audubon.
yeah, so basically, the snowball that was started has led to groups that, actually control, what the names of birds officially are, deciding that they're going to change the names of birds that have the names of humans attached to them that have problematic histories.
Nice, nice, nice.
And they are going to focus on essentially naming the birds, like based on like a physical feature or something like that, like a red something or other, or, a red booby. A booby is a real bird, folks. And I'm not saying that there's a version of the booby that has a human name attached to it that, is problematic or anything like that. But, in what we've discovered over the past, 10 years at least, is the silliness, I guess, of holding up figures in the past, because a lot of times those figures have been whitewashed throughout history, like Christopher Columbus. When we, went to school, the version of Christopher Columbus we learned in, like elementary history class was not the truth of what Christopher Columbus was like. I also think of the recent revelations of Cesar Chavez. Happy news, folks. But I think this is happy in the sense that, it's taking away just this unnecessary little burden that's being placed on these animals of a name that they did not choose themselves, that, to some people will have negative connotations. Let's just give them a regular name based off of, some sort of physical feature or what it looks like or something like that. And yeah, is that the most happiest thing in the world out there? Of course not, people, but happy stuff can arise from bad stuff happening.
Progress. It's great to see progress, to see actual things happening that are progressive. Because then that makes you believe other things that are important can also change.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it on the show before, how, people want change and they want it now. And that is a great feeling to have, and that's great to fight for, but sometimes change will take time. The bird watching incident that happened in New York happened in 2020. We're talking 6 years now. Change has happened, and it's done for a very good reason. So I'm happy about that.
Awesome. I'm happy about it too.
Yes, we'll get some proper named birds.
Yes.
All right. Any other thoughts for our friends at home?
That's it on the happy news.
Yes, we'll have to find some like public domain music or something like that. So to start it off. That would be funny.
That'd be great.
But again, the reason we are doing this, people, is that, our Friends Talking Nerdy is the podcast feed that you listen to, whether it be listening to the show on Monday or the Nerdy Bitz on any other day. That is Friends Talking Nerdy. And we want you to take your Sunday, the few minutes that you were taking to listen to this nerdy bit from us, and just reflect on something happy so that when you wake up on Monday, you can hopefully have a smile on your face.
That's right. We gotta buoy however we can.
Yes, there's a lot of bad stuff going on in the world right now, folks, and we need to look for happiness wherever we can find it.
Absolutely.
All right, so with that, we thank you for checking out our Nerdy Bits. You can check out regular episodes of Friends Talking Nerdy on Monday. We will have Songs of the Week on Friday. We will have Happy News on Sunday. We will also occasionally have some too long didn't read, some extra bonus material that we don't cover in the Monday episode pop up on particular days. Like this past Wednesday, we had one related to our episode about the decline of multi-generational homes.
Interesting.
So thank you for checking out our Nerdy Bits.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy
on YouTube Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify,
or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Bye, friends.